Everybody, welcome to another update from SuperOps. Now, one of the things we do with some of these updates is we bring in experts from the industry at the sponsor's request to talk about different things that they think are relevant to the industry, to the All Things MSP audience. And it's things that isn't necessarily like today about SuperOps. This is just about community and providing information and helping to lift everybody up. So I have some great guests today and a great topic as well. We're going to be talking about the future of MSPs, and who better to talk about that than a bunch of current MSPs and a bunch of former MSPs who continue to raise up the community and help by sharing their knowledge with us. So first of all, I'm going to just start in the top left with Mr. Paco Lebron from Prodigy Techs. He's the CEO of Prodigy Techs, and he's also the managing partner and podcaster from MSP Unplugged. Paco, how you doing today?
Like I like to say, Eric, better than good, better than most.
That's right. So what's coming up for MSP Unplugged? Anything?
Yeah, so we actually are working into our 5th annual in-person event called TechCon Unplugged. So it's going to be a great time gathering a lot of other MSPs and just kind of a culmination of our year-long journey with our community and audience, and kind of getting everybody together to reflect on the past year and what we've discussed on the podcast and other forums.
Yeah, and from what I have heard from previous attendees, it is a really great place to meet and interact with your peers, to, share those struggles that you're having, because a lot of people have gone through those. So I really appreciate the fact that you guys put that on. And then, of course, we have Mr. Juan Fernandez from SuperOps, the channel chief over there, and no stranger to MSPs himself and the struggles of running one. Juan, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me, Eric. And I'm just so happy to be here with all these amazing folks today. I love this energy, and I'm super pumped to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. And of course, we have Thomas Burris, the co-founder and CEO of Simple IT out of Indianapolis. Thomas, how are you doing today?
It's gray here, but it's great. So no rain so far, hoping that it holds off.
Yeah, it's been gray in North Carolina for 2 days, and now we finally have a nice sunny day. So it's great. Spring is actually sprung.
Please send some
here in North Carolina. And then last but absolutely not least, I saved the best for last, Nancy Henriquez from SuperOps. Nancy, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I think you did last month's show as well to talk about the super summits that you were doing. How's your day going? Nancy, you're on mute.
Never a live or a Zoom call without that, so I'm glad it was me. You're welcome. No. I was saying that my day today is better than yesterday, so I'm glad. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, so let's kind of dive into the topic for today, and of course, we're talking about the future of MSP, and I want to take it from kind of two levels. The immediate future, talking more about 2024, and then let's talk about the future, maybe 3 to 5 years out, right? So my first question is, what do you think are the short-term challenges for this year for MSPs? And I'm just going to start with Thomas on this one.
From our experience, talent gap is a huge issue that everyone's facing now and is going to continue to face in the future. I have other friends who run MSPs who they either can't find the right talent, or they end up getting ghosted on interviews, that people just don't show up for whatever reason. I think it's a huge problem. We have a lot of skill gaps that we need to fill, and it's just going to continue to hit MSPs in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's a big challenge, because we're talking about so many things changing that we need to adapt to and get those skills for. That talent gap is getting even worse. And I've experienced myself that ghosting, right? Of people, getting set up for an interview and then just never showing up. Anybody else have a comment on that talent gap? Because I think that's an important one. In fact, I was going to ask that as a separate question as part of this. So if anybody else has any input, I think now is a great time to go ahead and discuss that in a little more detail.
Yeah, I think that, when you think about the talent gap, it's one of those things that, the employee success mechanism has to be defined. Like this is where we're starting to see this shift in the requirements of people looking at businesses in a different way. They're looking for those, okay, let me understand your program, and you're getting asked different questions. Now you're kind of being interviewed, right? Because, there's this whole new world of people that have found a new way of doing things, right? This whole remote work from home, hybrid work has now changed the requirements for employers. And so if you don't meet a lot of the requirements for some of these folks that want those certain types of things, um, we're definitely seeing it, right? And so how are we making it enticing for them to do the things that we need them to do, or maybe even potentially go back to the office, right? Like those are the key components of creating that. And again, I'm no stranger to that as well, right? Like we have our corporate office that we have here in Texas. And, one of the things that I was assessing was, centralizing it to where everybody's kind of at, and then thinking about all the things that are important to them, like walking trails and, having light in the office and having snacks and all these other things. Like there's a variety of things that I've addressed that normally in the past, and when I created my MSP, I didn't think about any of that. I just was like, the office is here and this is where you go. Are you able to make it there 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, right? That was a completely different, and this is a very short switch between then and now, right? Like it's just only been like 2 years since I've been out. So it's very different. So I do think the talent gap is definitely the redefinition of how we do things is, and this evolution is something that we have to adopt or at least be paying attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else on the talent gap?
I think it's interesting to see, and I'm going to go back a little bit. So in order to understand where we are in the present, I think it's also good to understand where we are, where we've come from, right? And so I think over the years, there's been a higher push towards higher education and getting a college degree and, whatever that may be. Whereas in my time, I did not go to college. So I strictly learned everything that I did on the job. So it was through, on the job training and mentorship and so on and so forth. So a lot of what I feel is happening is maybe those opportunities for someone to start fresh out of high school and be taken through that journey of learning how to be a technician and how to be an engineer that is probably innately in them already. And fostering that within our organizations. And so I feel like that's something that is happening with the talent gap today. But then I'm also seeing a flourishing of talent happening nearshore or offshore. And so that's something that, MSPs have to take a look at now, especially in the type of environment that we are in with remote work and a global economy and so on and so forth, being able to find that talent in other ways that may not be traditional ways of finding talent. So that's one thing that I feel, yes, it's a huge problem, but there's creative solutions out there that we can definitely tap into.
I think that's
Awesome.
a whole show, though. I promise you, like we could cover a whole show on.
We could.
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh yeah,
Let's do it.
Thomas is
That
like,
could be next month, Nancy.
Yeah, I'll jump in really quick, Nancy. To that point, like I agree with you 100%, and like I am developing a 2 to 3 year work learning program for us to launch this summer, with that in mind of like how do we target talented high school students to take them through a 3 year program to give them general and then deep industry knowledge. Just because for everything you said.
Yep. And, I had a lot of success in recruiting from the local community college as interns doing something very similar to that.
Yep.
And, we'll save the rest of the talent gap for the next show.
Let's talk.
Because there is so much. Paco, a challenge in 2024 that's not the talent gap.
Well, I really think it's for MSPs, it's deciding what is their next step. I think this is really a pivotal year to understand that there's so much being thrown into an MSP's decision making, whether that is where they're going to lean in on infrastructure, whether they're going to lean into figuring out what flavor of AI they want to go ahead and go into. I think that, AI is a term that was overused previously several years, but now there's some teeth, there's some substance to what a MSP can do, not only internally, but also externally to their actual end clients, right? And so trying to determine, on the rate of, we're all responsible for mitigating risk, but how do we work on making sure that our clients are defensible as possible so that they are not deemed negligent to their end user? And so figuring out how to really focus and make the decision for this year that will then go into your next phase of questions is, what does it look like 3 to 5 years from now, and really figuring out. But I think that's really the struggle for this year, is there's so much to make the decision on. And so this year is probably a pivotal year to really anchor down and understand what is your foundation to launch yourself moving forward. So I think that's really the immediate need, is the immediate future is, what's that choice?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think AI is one of the biggest opportunities that, like you said, alongside brings challenges as well. Anybody else in terms of challenges for 2024, especially from Juan or Nancy's side?
Yeah, I think you got three of them, right? And I think you look at them in a different way. I think you got innovation as a challenge, right? I see the shiny ball syndrome as a challenge, and I see attention as a challenge, right? So when I think about those, and there's a fourth one that I've basically rebranded the whole year about, is education, right? 2023, I called it the year of education for MSPs to learn and to be educators, right? 2024 is now I've restaked my claim on that we still need a lot more to learn. And last year was cybersecurity. Now it's liability and it's innovation, right? So when we're thinking about the things that we're going to be doing in the future, looking for those new value equations, I see innovation being almost a shiny ball syndrome problem, because so many are taking their eye off of their operations of their business to focus on all these what ifs. And I think they're losing foot on some of their customers that they currently have, because they're not providing a high level of service, because they're paying attention to something that isn't reality yet, right? Again, we talk about the AI hallucination. This also happens inside a business, right? It's like, oh, there's this thing and I want to do it, but I don't know how to do it. And I'm not quite sure, but we stop paying attention to what's keeping the lights on, because we're chasing some dream, right, of getting rich quick. I see that as a big problem. And I struggled with this in our business to contain our focus when we were growing our MSP. And it was staying very deliberate with what we did well and not allowing external sources to influence our decision-making process, to what Paco just said. And I think that that's the thing, the attention piece, right, is what should I really be paying attention to? I've seen so many MSPs rush back into events to go see what's new, which I love, because we're hosting the AI Innovation Arena. And I get it, right? We want to see what's possible, but being careful of what's truly possible, right? Like, does this really align with my business? Is it something I can actively move forward on? I see so many starting to like spin up new businesses and take their eye off of what they're doing. And they're like, hey, I'm going to just go try to like do something on the side now. And it's like, are you sure you want to do that? Like, you spent so many years building your business, like to let it go now, you're just getting traction. Oh yeah, it's fine. And I'm like, so that's one of the challenges I see, right? I'm looking for like what's really happening. And I see those as the three big ones, with that fourth being education. But Nancy, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be a little biased here and say it's not because I'm head of community, but maybe it is. But I think that the community as a whole is something that I am seeing come together a lot more this year. So, and beginning with newer MSPs that are emerging, they're 2-3 years in, if that, and seeking the community, seeking the actual advice and things like that from the people that have been there, done that, us veterans who've been here forever kind of thing. And so that's one thing that I'm seeing, and that I'm really enjoying where it's going, in the sense of actually new MSPs coming out and saying, I need help. I don't want to go through what you guys went through. So help me if you can. And bringing that sense of community into the conversations that we're having all throughout. So I think that that's one thing that 2024 is going to bring, is all these communities coming together for the education, and for, just making sure that MSPs know you're not alone in this at the end of the day. You are not
Yeah,
alone.
absolutely. And that kind of goes back to what Juan was talking about in terms of finding out what you want to do, reduce the distractions. But then you also, by doing that, or in order to do that, you have to set up filters, right? And the communities can help you be, or have those filters. So one of the things because I want to double click on that for just a second and talk about what are some of the practical pieces of advice. And maybe I'll just go around and each of you can give one idea here, because I think one of the things that really helps is when we provide practical advice to the audience. Okay. So what is one filter that you can think of that you would put on their business to help them reduce that noise?
You want me to go first?
Absolutely.
I'll take the first shot. And I say this all the time, and I'm going to give you guys this I said it last night outside of the show that we did last night, but this is something that I'm very passionate about when I'm building businesses, right? And I'm thinking about due diligence, right? And I'm thinking about self-preservation and the profit protection program and like making money at managed services, right? All these things are the things that I'm focused on, right? Because I hate the alternatives to that, borrowing money and not affording it and creating, weird scenarios in your organization that you can't, buy coffee for the office, right? All those things are outputs of a lack of profitability. And one of the analogies that I use all the time, and one of the things that I say is, just because a vendor checks a box doesn't mean they put checks in my mailbox, right? Doesn't necessarily mean just because they meet a requirement doesn't mean that I'm actually going to make money with it. And that's where I think that if you're looking at tactical advice, look at, can I actually make money with this? Just because I can do it, and yes, maybe my customers say they want it, can I activate it in a profitable mannerism? That's something that we often don't get positioned with. We say, oh yeah, you can make money with it. They don't say how much, right? And so that was always something that I measure to make sure that like I have a minimum threshold of how much I'm going to make on a specific product. And then I would work with a vendor to make sure I did that. But that's something that I would say is a good piece of advice, is just be very careful about how you're approaching your relationships and thinking about, can I do this well? To Thomas's point a minute ago, some of the staffing challenges, it's already hard enough to find staff. So if your vendors aren't delivering the support for you, you're going to have to deliver support. So think about, can you staff that if you have to deliver that level of support? Like there's so many nuances there that go into that. So just do internal due diligence and run that through your, mechanism. Can I support this? Can I make money at it? Are there ways that I can actually scale this? Is it repeatable? Is this something my customers want? Like all those questions should be asked in bringing on a new vendor and thinking about a new route to market. So that's my advice.
Anybody else?
I'll jump in. So one thing to add to Juan's comments is, for me, when I was at my MSP, the question that I always asked myself was, who is this actually serving? And that was the main question. So for me, anytime that I selected a new vendor or a new piece of technology to include, a new process to adjust, anything that went into trying to improve my business, at the end of the day, I had to ask myself, who is this actually serving? Because if it's complicating things for my employees, or if it's making things more frustrating for my customers, I wasn't going to do it. And so that was the immediate filter that I put, or I guess the bottom filter that I put actually, because I would go through all of the, oh my God, this is nice and shiny and I want to do that. And this process is going to make things so much easier, but for who? So asking those questions of who is this going to serve was my ultimate filter that I put things through.
Okay, Thomas?
Yeah, I think also putting on the filter of who am I going to serve as well, right? Like really narrowing down who an ideal client is so that and kind of what Paco was saying earlier, like you got to make the decisions on here's where we as a company are going to go deep and spend our time so that we can really serve a specific client base well, because they fit, a specific client profile, but really like we know that we can really niche into that industry or whatever it might be really, really well, figuring out what that is and really developing all of your sales process and your delivery process and everything dedicated to that so that you know what vendors we need to work with and what processes we need to take and what regulatory compliance issues they might have as opposed to like taking whatever revenue comes in the door. I think even with smaller MSPs, like that's going to be critical, like narrow that focus on very specific client bases that it'll help you be more profitable, but it'll also help you cut out a lot of that noise.
Absolutely.
And to carry on what Thomas is saying, I think that for MSPs, especially fast emerging, who is kind of our focus with some of the things that we do, I think that really the biggest piece is in thinking of putting a filter is there's two frame of minds normally that I've seen. It's either there's an over-analysis paralysis on what they're trying to do, or it's a matter of they are offering solutions they are told they should be doing, but they don't have the confidence to say, I'm providing these solutions. They're more relying on what the vendors are telling them. And I know for a long time for us, we went into that not having confidence on saying we are doing the things that we're saying we're doing. We felt like we're really relying on the vendors to do their thing and hope for the best. Whereas now, for us, how we answered that was aiming for the MSP is we ended up basing all of our actions and our mitigation efforts and just as a company culture for that phrase, right? I'm very much about how to make our clients defensible so that they're not deemed negligent to their end user. So we decided to pick a framework and stuck with that. And so that framework determined how we would provide those proper services. So by being able to rely on something as a guide to then now put your filter on the individual pieces, the bites of the whale you want to take to then improve your service. So, we went 1 year from not having that confidence to now having a framework and now having something to adhere to. Now we had the confidence of we're doing as good as, the 20 to mega MSPs that are in the area that are claiming to do the same services that we are or are doing it, but we can now compete with that confidence. And I think that piece of the filter of now that you have the confidence, you now can sell it. And if you're able to, you can only sell something that you know and believe in, because if you don't, the end user is going to see that right through you. And so I think that's where the filter comes in play, is really understanding on what do you want to guide yourself with? And once you've developed that guide or quote unquote foundation, it'll allow you to then place that filter in different areas so that you're not overwhelmed and you feel stuck every single day.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something, Paco, that I think is really important, and that is the concept of a framework, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you're doing something like this, if you're evaluating something new to do in your MSP, it's the framework of the filters that we just talked about. And then the framework of the process is, okay, how do I spin this up in such a way that I actually gain that confidence? So thanks for pointing that out.
I think that just to add something else to that, I think that also speaks to the culture and the investment that is coming through from the vendors that you're working with or the partnerships that you're working with in general. So whether it's a vendor, whether it's a consultant, whether whoever it is that or coach that you're bringing in to help you with your business, if the culture isn't right, if you're not seeing the same level of investment into your business and helping you grow and helping you understand those products or understand how to go to market with them, then that's also going to create some rift where you're going to end up with relationships that you're going to feel like, well, they're not actually serving me. They're not doing anything for me. So, those are also some things to take a look at, is the culture and the investment of the level of education that is being put in to the relationship from the other side just as much.
Yeah. I will say that my favorite part of building any company is creating goalposts that are achievable and winning as a team. And as you mentioned, Paco, one of my favorite moments in any business that I've built is when I get to see that the team can see that the plan works. Like that is like my favorite goalpost moment, is like the play works and they know it works. And they come back and they're like, hey, this actually works. And I'm like, I know, right? Like, and that is when you can hear it. You can hear it at the help desk. You can hear it in projects. You can hear it. You can just see a whole new breath of life breathed into into your employees when they see it really works. And that again goes back to that thing we were talking about earlier. You can sell that. Hey, you know what? You want to know about working here? Why don't you ask the employees what they think about working here? And they'd be like, all they need to hear is it works and we love it. Boom. Now I got a new employee. They're like, all right, cool. As long as it works. Right. So that's where you have to, like, I love the fact that you guys talked about that, because that's like the mastery of leadership, is to get to that point where you can actually work through that. And then they come back and say, hey, this works. And I'm like, and even if it doesn't work, at least they have a process to actually iterating towards efficiency, right? Because evolution is always constant change. But can they activate that change and implement it? Like, that's the key to the next level, Paco, is I think is allowing them to be that change agent. So again, back to the whole employee thing, like that's another key component and driver of success. But I love this conversation. It keeps coming back here.
Yeah. Well, because experience matters, right? I talk a lot about customer experience and partner experience and employee experience, and it's all kind of part of that really becomes, in a commoditized world, the biggest advantage that we have as service providers or vendors. Now, we've already mentioned AI today, and AI has definitely kind of taken its place as a little bit of a bell at the ball for 2024. But for the last 4 or 5 years, the bell at the ball has been cybersecurity.
Sure.
So what do you guys think about cybersecurity in 2024? Is it more of an opportunity or more of a threat?
I'll let you know.
That's a great question and a great way to put it. I think that it may be a little bit of both, right? So it is definitely, it continues to be advantageous to sell and educate on cybersecurity because it's a continual thing. It never stops. So there's a continual opportunity there. But at the same time, it is a threat in the sense that we've seen MSPs being taken down over the last couple of years through our own vendors and the other ways through the supply chain at the end of the day. And so it does become a threat for ourselves as well to not understand what that actually means for our businesses. And are we actually, as MSPs, protecting our businesses in the same capacity as we would be protecting our customers? So it becomes a threat in that sense. Continues to be a threat, I would say.
I'm gonna let somebody else go. I'm gonna circle the last. I'm gonna be the last one up on this.
I can throw in there, and I think that cybersecurity for sure is the talk as well. But I think that just like the media plays, I think there's a lot of fundamentals that we still don't do as MSPs. And I think that there are technologies and efforts that can do things. Just getting a little creative, like, for example, 2FA was kind of we kind of need it. Now it's a standard, like you have to have it. And now it's like, hey, it's being, overridden more and more through stolen tokens and phishing and all that sort of deal. Right. And so the question becomes, all right, well, what's next? What's the next thing? And I think it's the IP allow listing. I think that's the next technology that people are probably going to start figuring out on, where getting that elevated controls, making sure that you have those. And these are not new things, right, that we have had. It's the question is, will the space find it serious enough if this is the next thing to really leverage? And I'm just using that as an example, but I think there's some fundamentals that we can implement and get better at, both on a feature request basis, or just on a getting creative and understanding, hey, if we did this slightly this way, we may be able to get away, further that goalpost till the bad guys figure it out type situation, right? Like, perfect example with the ConnectWise thing that they were going on. They were saying that there was a lot of those servers that were compromised, but I'm sure that if a lot of those had the IP restrictions or allow listing, it wasn't as much of a threat and had a little bit more time to patch those bad boys, right? As far as a login is concerned, right? So I think that, and that's the very minimum of me knowing, because I keep all my stuff in the cloud. I don't do self-hosted. So for those that are like, what the heck is this guy talking about? Not my area, just an example. But, I think that we are at a point where there are MSPs that just don't do some of the bare minimum to really help with some of the fundamentals that we could improve on that are available to us.
Oh yeah.
Thomas, do you have any thoughts on that, brother?
Yeah. Well, Paco, I agree with you 100%. Like, we've got to drink our own champagne. If we are going to tell a client that they need to do it, then we have to do it ourselves. And to hold ourselves to the same standard and accountability, right? Like, the day that the cobbler's children have no shoes is gone. We've got to do the same things that we tell our clients they need to do. Absolutely. But to the original question, I think cybersecurity, like Nancy said, is always going to remain a continuous threat that we can't take our eyes off of. It's going to become more indirect. I think when you start talking about AI versus cybersecurity in that arena, like Juan said, I feel like I'm just going to ditto everybody. But we can't let it become the shiny ball that we are let's go play with AI and figure out what we can do with it, right? Like, if you're going to start working with AI, have a very clear plan on what is this going to do for our business? How is this going to serve our clients and our customers? How are we going to make it a useful tool? And so that we can continue to focus on the things that we need to do day in, day out, the reps that we need to put in so that ourselves and our clients stay secure. On the flip side of that, though, I think cybersecurity is going to continue to be a major threat because of AI, because you have more people who are able to leverage these AI tools for the multi-billion-dollar cybersecurity industry, right? Like, they're going to become more natural sounding. Things are going to make their way through from an email security standpoint more frequently, that it's like, oh yeah, this definitely sounds like how my CEO sounds. Of course I'm going to go buy $700 in Best Buy gift cards and be the hero, right? So that's just going to continue to be a thing that we need to be aware of, is the bad guys are using AI tools to make themselves better at what they're doing. So we need to stay on the ball with cybersecurity and mitigating those threats.
Yeah. And a perfect example of that merging of AI and cyber threat is that case where over a Zoom call, they impersonated both the video and the audio of the executives to actually convince somebody to wire, was it $5 million? Something like that. I mean, it's crazy what's happening out there today.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see it as more of a Venn diagram for sure. There's an intersection between cybersecurity and AI that we haven't even started to actually look into in the depth that we need to, especially when it comes to the responsibility that we all hold for the data and for what the AI is actually able to do and so on and so forth, which I'm sure Juan has something to say about
Well, I
that.
mean, if you look at what it is, right, it's not that the technology that's arrived isn't awesome, right? I think it is. I also think the technology that arrived is almost just as big as a threat as the what was here just before, if not even more so. And the reason for that is that we still haven't implemented really truly best practice, right? I think that's the opportunity that Paco mentioned early on. Like, I see this so commonly, and a lot of the reasons that cybersecurity is such a big deal is the lack of best practice, right? It's the lack of efficient onboarding, right? It's the lack of, those moments in time where we say, this is actually the baseline for onboarding this customer, and really doing it in a best practice mannerism, right? So I've said this for years, you win and lose at onboarding, and we are losing because we are not doing onboarding well. And that's again, just because of that and that not changing is going to impact and give these threat actors more of the ability to take advantage of all the things that we are not doing, right? That's the whole point of us getting faced with regulation and all these other things. Like, I don't want you to tell me what to do. Well, I hate to say it, if you're not doing it well, you're putting your customers at harm. And that's why you lose customers, because others come in and run a scan on your environment and find that you haven't done all those things. So again, it's not a shot at anybody. It's just saying that that's the opportunities for us to do a better job. That's money on the table from the beginning for those MSPs that aren't charging. They could potentially be charging for onboarding for an effective onboarding program. So that's where I think a lot of the opportunity lies. Again, the threat, it's going to be persistent. It's not going to stop. It's actually going to get even worse. And with AI, I can go into an environment now and just wreck somebody's environment, right? So without best practice in place, I
But
personally
you
wouldn't.
won't. I have to set a disclaimer. I'm saying
We
I got to put
wouldn't
in a
do that.
disclaimer
I
here.
wouldn't
You
do
won't.
that. But for instance, like when I look at how we can utilize technology for good, I use it to illustrate what is the opportunity, right? And we use AI in a much different way at SuperOps, right, to actually help our customers in a much different way to actually become more effective. But when I'm thinking about it as a tech, I'm like, okay, if I wanted to activate this thing, like, we could make this really bad, right? And this is the challenge: is that it's not that in the current world that we live in, that it's intended for that. It's just the steps that we've taken to get to this place. There's fractures, right? There's big holes between. We've kind of jumped over a couple of spaces, and we need to go back and shore those up so that this road is smooth. And that's where I think the opportunity lies, is for us to actually, just even in the customers that we have, is just revisit and onboard them in a standard, modern day, secure, zero zero control access environment where we know what's happening, back to the command and control days, where we really have a good handle on our customers. I think that's the opportunity for us. I don't think we should fear the threat, because it's going to be ever coming, but we definitely need to go back and kind of review some things. That's why I keep saying education is paramount. Is if we go back, we can learn new lessons. We can teach our customers new ways. To that point, we can educate them more on the security threats and all the new things that AI is generating and the ways that we can be doing it, and educate them on that new era. So those are my two thoughts.
Yeah. And, people, the frameworks exist for cybersecurity. Use them. Align those best practices to what you're doing, and, you'll be ahead of your competition for sure.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah. And don't set it and forget it. That's one thing. In my MSP, I used to say it's rinse and repeat, because it's a continuous cycle. You have to keep
We used to
your eye
onboard our
on the ball.
customers every year, and we used to call it an end of year cleanup. And it just got us close to the customers, go in and find stuff that maybe we missed, stuff that had gone through or stuff like that. That was so fun. We'd bring in food and just sit down and clean the place up, and go into the new year knowing that we had a customer that was well run. And we knew that, hey, last year, here's all those small changes that we made that didn't impact us, so that we didn't have to worry about it the next year. So Don't worry, your customer's okay if you come see them. It's all right.
Yeah. And we're in an industry that evolves all the time, whether it's cybersecurity or whether it's new technologies. And so there are always those things that you need to be bringing up to your clients.
We used to have that in-service day, and I'll give this one last little piece is when we came in to do the cleanup, we would do a pre-half day of like all of the things that you should be watching for in your business that are applicable to that customer type. It was probably the best thing. We'd buy lunch, let them ask lots of questions like, hey, I just did this, or my husband did that in his business, or my wife did this, or here's what I do at home, and providing those components and then go do the cleanup. It really opened up doors, and it was probably one of the funnest things we did. They loved seeing us every year. So just a little, for instance.
Yep. And I think it's a great idea and something everybody should be doing. So as we wrap this up, we talked about a lot of great things for 2024. But the last thing that I want to cover is I want to cover what you think individually, each one of you, is the biggest thing coming down the pipe after 2024. So Paco, let's start with you.
I will say two things. One, I think that we're going to get to a point where there's going to be AI to AI integrations because there'll be so many in the play in the arena. And so I think that there will be that phase of figuring out what's your flavors, similar to what we do is stitching tools together for our stack. I think they're going to be AIs that we're going to be stitching together and having integrations back together. And then I think that we're going to start really relying on the remote workforce because of the talent gap, as we mentioned. So I think we're starting to see more and more of the cloud PCs and whatever their flavor of cloud, especially now that Windows 10 is end of life next year. I think we're going to start seeing a lot of infrastructure starting to be going that way so that remote workforces can support them versus relying on hardware to send someone physically that we're trying so hard to find nowadays.
Yep. Thomas?
I think the biggest opportunity is with AI, right? And how we can start utilizing conversational AI to have interaction with clients and client employees at the first level. Something as simple as a chat bot in your RMM app on there, right? They can just start interacting with a conversational AI that then generates a ticket or even, long-term solves low-level, low-hanging fruit type things like I'm locked out of my account or I need a password reset or I think there's a lot of opportunity to move in that direction.
Absolutely.
Juan or Nancy?
So one thing I would say that I see in the future is a lot more women and diversity. That's what I have to say.
Where are all the women at? Get in here.
Well, I love the fact that we're seeing that trend, exactly. Right? We are absolutely seeing that trend, not only in the technician and help levels, but in the ownership levels. We're seeing a lot more women than we've ever seen before, absolutely. Which is great.
Oh, yeah. I realized this year is my 20th anniversary of being in the industry, which is like, holy moly, I'm 20 years. Wow. And thinking about that, how many rooms and how many conferences and all of that I went to where I was the only for a very long time. And so now I have formalized a super women MSP group for SuperOps with SuperOps, and it's a group of we've got 6 women and counting, and it is just amazing to see their thoughts and what their plans are for the future and how collaborative they are with everyone and not just with each other and all of that. But that's what I see just exploding in the future, and having a lot more diversity within our not only the MSPs but our community as a whole, which is fantastic.
I can't wait. It's been a lonely room with a whole bunch of guys for a long time, so I'm glad that there's women in here. I will say this, Eric, to that point, when I think about this, and I've kind of been watching this trend for a little while, I'm looking at the future all the time in terms of what MSPs are really wanting to do. Where can we activate at? And I think, as we start to look at the types of things that we do currently today and this evolution and the revolution towards the modern managed services era, I look at this thing and I say, you know what? I feel like business operations as a service is going to be the thing that we do, right? We're going to run somebody's business for them effectively in its entirety, right? It's not just going to be monitoring and management. It's not just going to be, and it won't just be for our customers. I think we will have that autonomy now where we will start to see where we can actually now focus on the things that actually move us and drive our intrinsic values and our lives forward, where I think technology's caught up to us in a place where we can actually start leveraging it to help our lives become better and live the lives that we want to. And again, to Paco's point and to Thomas's and everyone's point here, where we talk about the remote workforce and being able to work and live anywhere, I think you're going to see businesses that can work and live everywhere as well. And so, I look at those things and I really feel like that business operations as a service thing is coming really quick, right? I see that innovation happening. I see it where I'm watching MSPs pivot into this full-blown, full solution set characteristic of everything as a service, which we talked about back in like 14, 15, 16. Now it's not just hardware. And you can hear HP and like some of these other big companies talking about AI being 67% of computers next year will be AI driven, right? So when you stitch the endpoint into the software in a way that it can now function, now all of a sudden we have new value creations that we can amplify. I think security actually probably takes a little bit of a step back just because now automation is going to step forward, right? We're going to have more intelligent opportunities there. And I think that, for the lack of better words, when we don't do something, technology seems to step into the hole. Right. And so that's where we have to be a little bit careful, I think, stepping into the future is planting our feet and saying, this is what we're going to do. We'll build technology around us here. Right. And this is where I think that stand happens. So I'm excited to see as I watch this play out. We'll rewind the tape in a couple of years, Eric. We'll have to do this again and see what happened. But I'm hopeful and I'm very encouraged by it.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. I think the business operations as a service, I'm glad you brought that up. I would actually say that has almost been the silent evolution of the MSP ever since we were break fix, right? Yep. Because we've gone from being a nice to have because computers were a nice to have. They weren't on everybody's desk. Not everybody had email. We transitioned to now everyone has a computer on their desk. Everybody at the company has an email address, and it's just becoming more and more critical. I think it is accelerating though. So I think you're right in that aspect that over the next 3 to 5 years, we are going to become much more business partners rather than just technology partners.
Yeah, I agree. You think about the total number of devices that you have. If I just in my peripheral look at how many devices I have that are connected right now, it's over 20, right? And so when you think about our role in this modern ecosystem, it's so important. We just have to take control of that. And that's where I think it's going to be very, very interesting to watch, Eric. And I'm happy to watch alongside you wonderful folks. And for those that are building it, love you to death. You guys keep it up. I love watching you guys build new things.
And hopefully we will be here to see it.
Hopefully.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Juan, Nancy, Paco, Thomas, I really appreciate you coming on and diving into this subject today. I think there's a lot of absolutely tangible and tactical content that people can take away from today and actually deploy in their business. And we want to thank SuperOps for sponsoring these episodes. We thank them as well.